Namaskar and welcome to this new exciting show on historicity of Mahabharata. And like I always been speaking to so many academicians about the Sathology talks on how we debunk the mythology tag to the ancient history of the world. Before the colonizers went out from Europe to other parts of all parts of the world, including South America, India. So today we have a very remarkable guest. All of you have loved her talks, and she has given so much factual information to all of us. In fact, she is my teacher on especially on history, even though I am a scholar of Mahabharata. But today we're going to ask her specifically on the ground what is left and what needs to be done, and also what was the history. Last year, she gave me a tour of Purana Kila, and she took me out to different places, and I was astonished. And so we have to speak up and protect our own heritage. So without delay, I would like to welcome Miss Neera Mishra.
Thank you. Namaskar.
So Neera ji, you have done such an amazing work, and you're an author, you're a writer, you're a teacher. You teach management classes at some universities in India. So tell me one thing about your new this research that you have done in the past on Indraprasth. So in the last program, we already discussed what is Indraprasth, where is Indraprasth, and today we are going to cover a little bit more what is left of Indraprasth and what we as a global community can do to make things more smoother at Indraprasth.
I think I might say a few controversial things also when I'm going to tell you what is left of Indraprasth. Uh, as I told you last time, Indraprasth it was established as a very vast area, and the five areas given to the Pandavas were in today's the names that exist are Sonipat, Panipat, Bagpat, Tilpat, and Indrapat. Indraprasth is the whole Delhi area, the Delhi NCR area, and Tilpat, Bagpat, Sonipat are adjacent in the other capital region, which were a part of it. What is left of Indraprasth, you asked me specifically. Uh, I think after so many invasions and conquering, the only Delhi area, the New Delhi and the Delhi NCR area, there are remains, there are landmarks that tell us that this was Indraprasth. For instance, there was an inscription found in 1878 at Narayana area, which is the border of Haryana. Another was found at Raisina, which is where the president's house is now, the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And there is an inscription of the Sultanate period that is from UP, which says that the kings there, the Sultanpur king, was the custodian of Indraprasth. Now, in terms of the area, in terms of physical remains, we have landmarks like, of course, the Purana Kila, the old fort, which was, as per all historical records, right from our Mahabharata, right from the Sultanate period, and the writings of many, even Ptolemy, he mentions it. So we have mention of Indraprasth. We have the remains of that period in the form of the Shakti Peeth Mandir, which is the Yog Maya Mandir. See, this place is also known as the city of Yog Maya, because she was the Krishna's sister, and Krishna, we all know, had two sisters, one Subhadra and one Draupadi. So it is dedicated to them. We have a place in Rajghat where Yudhishthir performed the Yajna. Then inside Puranakla is Kunti Mandir, and all the palace areas was inside Purana Kila. But in terms of archaeologically finding, there is something called a painted graveware culture, which was first discovered in Hastinapur in 1951-52 by Professor Lal. Those pieces have been found in many parts of Delhi. So we can very, very safely say that the whole of Delhi, the whole of NCR, the state of Delhi, including Sonipat, Panipat, Tilpat, Bagpat, are part of Indraprasth. When I said I'm going to say controversial things, in 2015, I came across a news item in the Times of India that the Delhi Development Authority, which is the authority that looks after the land in the Delhi state, is making a huge archaeological park. So I was at Purana Killa area. The photo picture was Purana Killa. I was so excited. But when I read in between the lines, it said they are going to call it the Deen Panha Archaeology Park. And that sent shockwaves to me because as per revenue records, as per land settlement records, as late as 1877, we have something called an Indraprastha Pargana. Pargana means a district area and a protected area. We have a map of it. We have revenue records. We have population. It had a population of about 3,500. It had a revenue of, in those days, about 2,000 US dollars. So all these little things were known to me. And I was shocked that why they're calling it Deenpana. And that's where my fight and my intense research to dig out more and more information on Indraprasth started. And first of all, what my first step was to stop the naming of Deenpana, which successfully I managed. It took me 3 years, but yes. So the proposal is to call it Indraprasth Archaeology Park. Then we have what I would call, there are many temples around Delhi. Now, those temples have been submerged or hidden, but they have a continuity from ancient times. And they are linked to Indraprasth. So, politically, the problem has happened is that due to invasions and due to what I call the monument jihad, all the areas that were related to ancient India have been sort of destroyed. Now, I'll get back. I want to explain this via something very important, which will tell you how important it is to revive Indraprasth. After 1947, Sardar Patel and V.N. Gadgil and Munshi, K.M. Munshi, visited Patan, which is in Gujarat. It is the place of Somnath temple. And then and there, it was decided that this temple will be rebuilt with government support. And they started, and he made a public announcement, Sardar Patel. But I'm trying to come back to Indraprasth, why we are in such a bad state and why it needs to be developed. But when they moved the file, the then Prime Minister objected. The then Education Minister, because culture was then under education, archaeological was under education, they resisted and they refused to move the files, and they said you can make Somnath, but not with government money. And the idea, it was written, it should be kept in ruins. So K.M. Munshi said that if you can give funds to build a mosque and to give all these other Muslim monuments, why not to this? And this was a very prolonged fight. Patel died. After that, the Somnath was built. But it set a very bad precedent, because after Patel, Gadgil and K.M. Munshi, the stalwarts were not there. The whole policy of ASI became keep all ancient sites in ruins so that they decay and die naturally. Or somebody sort of, tramples over them, somebody takes them over. This is exactly what has happened with Indraprasth. Fortunately for us, when the colonials came here, and they were so surprised to see that there is in every nook and corner of India some ancient antiquity piece. So they started researching and documenting. Alexander Cunningham was the pioneer. That's where a notification was given, and we have a 1911 notification, a gazetted notification, when they were shifting their capital to Delhi from Calcutta, that this Purana Killa area is the Indraprasth and it will be protected. So in terms of now, the protected area of Purana Killa is the Indrapat. But as for me, the whole of Delhi is Indrapat. Any specific question, or I can go on?
No, you have given a lot of details right now. So, number one, your point is Alexander Cunningham. Now, Alexander Cunningham is also known as the butcher of Mohenjo-daro in many academic circles. Because he was the one, despite knowing the importance of Mohenjo-daro, he built a railway line right through it. So when the railway line was put between Lahore and Balochistan, it was destroyed by his work on archaeology. So in archaeological circles, he is known for Christianizing a lot of the history of India. Now coming back to your second point on the which you mentioned.
Can I
uh,
answer that? Can I answer
no,
that?
no, that was
Okay,
you
okay,
can
come on.
later on,
Oh,
please.
I can. Okay, okay, tell me now.
So in the second point you made about the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and other things, see the in the modern time frame which you have today, it is the sometimes the Western audience or all of us cannot understand why India would not like to protect their own heritage or tell the real story to their own people. So, what are the reasons do you think are happening?
Okay, so number one about Alexander, I'll tell you, I'm 100% agreeing with you that their motive was not to protect Indian uh, heritage. They were, as I said, they were surprised to see so much antiquity, and you will see that all the antiquity is gone abroad. I mean, there is a very lovely WhatsApp
I would
group.
like to correct you there. Most of the
Uh,
antiquities they put under the railway line. So
yeah,
the
yeah,
railway line is on top of it.
correct. That is happening even today in India. Even today, when we are making the metro, we are making places all over the country. Nobody is there to even check what antiquity has come out. What is the importance of that place? Because it's a blind eye. I mean, we are not against modernization, but if there is a place where something has been found, at least the marking of that place has to be done, and the antiquities taken out and preserved. Today, all the antiquities, if you remove all the antiquities from the museums in Britain, Britain will be an empty place. There will be nothing there. So uh, they were there. Alexander's the only plus point about him was that they were able to identify so that they knew what to take away and what not to, and what to let it be to be destroyed. Now, coming back to the second point, the main reason why our history and antiquity is not being showcased is because of the role of politics and political ideology on scholarship. I can give you a few very important examples to tell you that one example is that the obstruction to Somnath temple that resulted in a very strong policy of ASI not to develop any points of ancient India, because for a long time it was the same people who was ruling, whether it was Maulana Azad or his likes. Okay, so the government was under the influence of either the Muslim invaders or under the colonial concept that all this is humbug. There is nothing important to it. So we were, Aryans had come from abroad and made it, and it's not yours. So that attitude, even the so-called educated were educated in a colonial mindset, educated under the influence of invaders, so they could not even visualize all this. But today, again, I'm sorry to say, the politics continues. Politics continues that even today inside Purana Killa, an old school building is destroyed in 2018, but a new Muslim building is created. This politics has played a key role in two ways. One is distorting the texts. Now, this distortion of text started because if you don't read in the text after some time, after 2, 3 generations, you don't know about it. So after 1947, one of the tallest historians of India, R.C. Mazumdar, put up a proposal that we want to create now our own history, write our own books. And this proposal went to Nehru, and Nehru said, yes, yes, very good, we must write our own history. But and he formed a committee under and he made him the director to create a draft. When the draft reached the education minister and the prime minister, they were absolutely shocked. And they said, no, they just didn't say anything. They just dropped the idea and they created they didn't even create a committee. They appointed a bureaucrat who had studied medieval history from Allahabad. He was very close to the Gandhi Nehru family. And why the draft was dropped? Because R.C. Mazumdar said facts that India's freedom struggle has been going on for over 600 years. Different parts of India are still fighting for freedom even when the Britishers came. So they were not only fighting the Britishers, they were fighting the Mughal invaders also. This is what did not suit them. So so it's very surprising that India has two books on the same topic, the history of the freedom struggle of India by Tara Chand, who was appointed by the government. That's the government version, that India's freedom struggle started in 1957. Whereas
1857.
1857. But the R.C. Mazumdar did not give up, and he had a great following. And with the support of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, which was launched by K.M. Munshi, he went on full swing to write the history of freedom movement in India the way it was, that is 600 years, say whatever happened. And he very clearly said that don't try to give that everybody is living in peace. Nobody is living in peace. Everybody is trying to control. So we have two books telling us two stories of the freedom struggle of India. Had it not been for R.C. Mazumdar, today I would not have been able, or many of us would not have been able to actually know what really happened prior to the Mughal came, or prior to what the colonials did. Second important example, that after somewhere in the 69, 70s, when Indira Gandhi came to power, how politics has actually played this horrible role to downgrade scholars. She came to power, she appointed a new committee under G. Parthasarathi, and G. Parthasarathi formed another board, and in that committee, they had put S.L. Bhairappa. He was a professor of education history at NCERT, which makes the textbooks. Now he went and said that we should not write anything in the textbooks that will hurt the sentiments of a particular community and create problems for them. So Bhairappa asked him what? He says, don't write that Aurangzeb came and he destroyed Kashi temple, or he destroyed so many temples, or Ghazni came and destroyed Somnath temple. Don't write all this. He says, but why not? That is a fact of history. He says, no, you should not write things which are going to create enmity. He says, history cannot be hidden. You have to write facts. And then Bhairappa tried to justify, saying, while we are writing that Aurangzeb did these bad things, we are also writing that Akbar was a proactive king. He tried to create amity. He understood Indian culture. He took everybody along with him. So we are talking about historical people. We are talking about people who did good and who did bad. We are not talking about Muslim or Hindu. But within 15 days, that committee was dissolved, Bhairappa was kept out, and the textbook started being treated. That is the time we had ICHR being created, JNU came, in that philosophy wala, Indian Council for Philosophical, all these things were set up to give a particular ideological sort of a tilt to our education. Now, if the education is being taught in a particular way, if Archaeological Survey of India is working in a particular biased way, obviously the real history of India will never come out. Same time, two other organizations were promoted. I don't know, very few would know, Rajiv Gandhi, who was then a pilot, was the first chairman of INTAC. Indian, this INTAC is the Indian National Center for, Heritage. It's called INTAC. And it was created again with the same purpose of promoting the tilted, the biased, a particular narrative of only Mughal India, particular narrative of communist influenced ideological thoughts. So what was being taught in JNU and research being done through ICHR was being on ground implemented. The geospatial landscape of India was being controlled. On the one hand, textbooks controlled by the people who are in charge of textbooks, research controlled by ICHR and all that. Then came in Aga Khan, Trust for Culture. Now we all know there is no harm if you are promoting your particular type of culture, but why only one organization is given the free hand? Because they on their website say that we work for Muslim architecture and Muslim culture, etc. So they got embedded into ASI, INTEC got embedded. So these two, that is the reason. The reason is that parallel lines were running, one on history, one on physical, geospatial, cultural, this thing, and both of them promoting a particular narrative of history. So today we do not see any, can you believe it, a fantastic temples of India with high precision, architecture and aesthetic, artworks. They are not in the world map. They are not a part of the world wonders of the world. But
So
what is wonder of the world?
just a minute, Lil, hold on, because
So these are the reasons why we don't know our history and culture.
Neeraji, it's a one-on-one interview. Just hold on, one-on-one. So
Yeah,
you'll
yeah.
get a lot of opportunity to speak.
No, I know. That's why you.
So just hold on 1 minute.
Yeah.
So when you said about particular community, I want to tell the viewers it's the Muslim community. And the second thing I want to say is that most of the Muslims in India, and majority of them, they want to hide the barbarism caused by the Islamic invaders to India against the temples of India and also Hindus. And this is no way we are promoting any enmity or any fight. But as a matter of students of history, we have to mention it the right way. So the barbaric attacks of Islamic invaders to India had destroyed around 40 to 50,000 temples. And the subsequent secular governments of India, which were supposed to be religiously neutral, they worked in the favor of those Islamic organizations, and they tried to destroy further after independence also. So very little effort has been done since independence to preserve these temples. Now, coming back to the point that you were making, that most of these places are ignored by ASI and other organizations in India. But this is the time where the ruling party has come to power on a Hindu vote. So the question comes to most of our minds is, and I can see the questions coming on, what are the voters doing about it? Because if the voters are majority Hindus, why still that Muslim appeasement is going on?
See, majority of the Indians consider that facts of history should always be taught. Even Muslims believe that. There are Muslims who believe that facts should be shown. It is only the politically, troublemakers who want to incite this problem about it. Now, the voters, what can a voter do? Because, frankly speaking, with the so much of rise in population in India, there is a rush for trying to get jobs, trying to get income. So people get carried away by big slogans, or people get will not talk anything because they know that I have to get a job. Why should I talk of heritage? Heritage won't give me a job. But I always feel that if we make cultural heritage tourism an important part of our national policy, then a lot of people will always want to vote for parties which will take care of their heritage. Voters have a very limited role. I personally feel that vote bank politics plays a very, very important role. Vote appeasement is there. This government does not believe in appeasement. This government does not believe in any type of bias. They are doing everything for everybody. And in fact, it's very happy to know for the first time ever, the budget of India identified five ancient places which need to be redeveloped. That is, one is Rakhigadi, then they have Hastinapur, then there is Dholavira in Gujarat. So they have and one is Assam. So different parts of India, some of the oldest places. So the new trend that has started, I think in the next step, we are pushing for Kampil and Indraprasth because you see, Hastinapur is the oldest Mahabharata site. Now that Ayodhya has already got started, so the Ramayana circuit has been taken care of. They are building a Ramayana circuit. But now the Mahabharat circuit will come, and along with that, the other Indus Saraswati civilization circuits will come. This government has taken the initiative. After so many years of fight, I think we have reached a stage. Voters will have a limited role because voters get very easily carried away. And as I said, it's always what can I get for myself? Will the heritage help me? So if there is a policy to make heritage, knowledge of history very important for everybody, because if you don't know your history, you don't know yourself.
So I'll tell you one example. So Vatican is an artificial setup, is a business kind of thing. They have no history. So most of the history is through baptization, and many of my viewers also know that most of the history is through like the conversion and selling an idea and a faith. That's what they're doing. Same thing is with the Islamic historians also, where Islamic historians are trying to sell a very glorified version of their own belief. So everyone is selling in this market their belief, and history plays an important role in identity. Without the identity, people can be easily manipulated without a strong identity. Now, if you look at the Vatican museums today, in the Vatican museums, they have completely demolished and removed anything Roman, anything Greek, and including even many people don't even know that the Saint Peter's was crucified in the Peter Basilica right in the Vatican courtyard. And I saw the place, and where he was hung upside down. Very barbaric history, but they're selling in the names of humanity and calling them martyrs. But it's a murder, not a martyr. But still they're glorifying it. The Indian history on the reverse of it is filled with genuinely truthful and genuinely good characters, whether it's a ruler. So the entire bad experience of the Western world about the ruler class comes from the rulers itself, which are barbaric. They had only one agenda to follow the church agenda, which is the going from Pope. But Indian history is filled with great examples which have never come before, have been put across in North America. This is the first time sociology is doing it, where we are the first time putting the good history from India out in the public domain in the US. So, is
See,
there an attempt from these medieval writings, because the writings and publications make the history livable or living? So, what are the attempts on the academic side, other than the archaeological side, also to bring forth that aspect of wisdom from Indian rulers?
See, on what you said about Vatican or the other religions, as I would like to repeat, I think I said it before also, that in India, ancient India, and for a very, very long time, even today, we do not believe religion should be mixed with politics. And we believe in a very democratic way. Whichever God you want to believe, you believe in. You can believe in Ganesh, you can believe in Ram, you can believe in Krishna, you can believe in Devi, whatever. Whereas in Christianity and in this thing, you have to believe in Muhammad, otherwise you are not anything. If you have to believe in Christ. So the religion has got mixed up with the politics. Whereas this did not happen, and that's why we remain truthful. We looked up to the king. If he was a good king, then he's a good king. If he's a bad king, but we write about everything, which is not happening abroad. And they have completely removed the horrible tale of the way the brutalities on Hindus over here, especially the last Hindu king at Purana Killa. I had told you last time. uh, I think the academicians have been the Aligarh type, the JNU types, have done their best to sort of demolish anything that is ancient India, to demolish any truthful history of India, and because they were tuned and trained and manipulated to write what the communists want them to write. And obviously, the Muslims have played a very strong role in this, because by denouncing the ancient India, the Muslims can very easily go on showcasing there. I mean, it's not only Muslim and this thing, to the extent that even Sher Shah Suri's Purana Killa was also ruled by, whatever we see in Purana Killa, the medieval period is Sher Shah Suri, but nobody talks of Sher Shah Suri. They only talk of Humayun, and nothing, not even a pin of Humayun is there. Nothing, because everything was destroyed. But Akbar's book says that Humayun made it on Indraprastha. Now, academicians do not write the truthful history. In the last 10-15 years, we have all coming out, and I'm very, very grateful to all the now more outspoken academicians who are coming out. Unfortunately, just I think in the last 5-6 years, the official the universities have come in, but before that it was independent people like us, independent scholars, who were pushing this idea that why are we hiding our own history? I mean,
So,
we just on Indraprastha, as I tell you, we did the dating. How old is Indraprastha? 3005, 3006. That means almost 3065 BC plus 2020. More than 5,000 years ago, Indraprastha was established. So you mean to say there were no rulers in Indraprastha? Where is the history of those rulers? And we have a list of each and every ruler of Indraprastha. So the academicians are trying to do whatever they can, but it's a big fight between the people who have bought the media, people who are supported by the communists, who go on propagating. The mainstream media will never write about the truth of history of India, of Indraprastha. They talk about Indraprastha. They think that we are talking in some, we are some people who are in some other days. So our problem is that we are still fighting pseudo-secular people. We are still fighting with the tilted, motivated historians who have ruled for almost 70 years over here. So it will take us little time, but we have made a start. And with the government coming in to revive those places, the textbooks, sooner or later, we will ensure that the textbooks start teaching. And then the mainstream academicians will come forward, you see. I told you what happened with academicians. Bhairappa was thrown out. R.C. Mazumdar was thrown out. But they continued, persisted. Bhairappa is writing. You just go on the net and see Bhairappa's articles. And this has been happening. I'm sorry to say, but the schools of divinity have played a very negative role in denouncing India's history and culture, because their stated aim is they were set up as seminaries to train, to sort of bring up the father and the sister, people who will take forward the church. And they started having something called the cultural studies with the objective of studying the culture of all parts of the world. But the objective was to denounce others, but to showcase only their culture as true. So these are the academic plays that have been happening in America. We have many people. I mean, it was so shocking that in 2010, we did a 3-day international conference with all leading scholars of the world. How deep are the roots of Indian civilization? And there is a scholar sitting in Harvard by the name of Witzel. He writes in the Communist Watch, a weekend entertainment of fundamentalists. So if you talk about ancient India, you're fundamentalist.
No, I
So
know that
this is
professor
the
very well, and I'm suppose he's watching right now. So
hope
we,
so.
we completely denounce him, and also Francis Clooney, Clooney, the head of the Hindu Studies of Harvard. We denounce them. We don't agree with them in any way. Now, my one of the things that you said about the archaeological jihad, something like that you said.
Monument jihad.
Yeah, monument jihad, and this is a very fantastic term because there is one aspect which all of us should know, even at the Sathology clubs we have, is that the history is always told from the point of view of power. And especially I can say about church and Islamic religion, they have nothing against religion, but if you academically study them, their the religion is the basis of politics for them. So the politics is used to propagate the religion. So that's why most of these groups, even the church, and thankful to the U.S. American Foundation, American founders, U.S. founders, they kept church completely separate from the politics from the beginning itself, and that's the reason of growth of USA. In the England and other European powers, church is very much involved till date, either in the form of monarchy or in the church as usual. So, and in case of Vatican, Vatican is an independent state, so propagating Catholicism. And so again, it's a political objective. Politically, they work politically, but their objective is to spread their Catholicism, which is not Christianity. Most of the people confuse them. It's not Christianity. Catholicism is the Church of Peter, St. Peter's. So now in India, we have a culture, like you explained, that the Sanatan Dharma culture is a very broad culture. It has a wide acceptance of others' beliefs and culture, and that's why still without any government support, it is spreading. And so when Americans see India, they see it as a very confused country where their religion is something else and they talk about everyone else but themselves. Do you think that can be corrected anytime?
I don't know why they are confused. I think they should appreciate the fact that we Indians are mature enough to understand something very simple. That simplicity is this, that there is a connect between the human being and nature and some superpower that created us, that created nature, that created us. And so the Sanatan Dharma believes in the spirituality, the spiritual connect of the human with living beings, non-living beings, and the universe. Whereas they do not believe so much in spirituality as in a particular religious dogma.
There
So
is a question
we are
coming
not
to me right
confused.
now. There is a,
Huh.
I think we are upon that hour actually. We've gone
Huh.
actually way past the hour, which
Oh, I'm
probably
so
we had.
sorry. Huh.
Now, just one last question and we'll end the talk here. That why Hindus shy to call themselves as Hindu?
Hindus, I don't know. I think they shy because I'll tell you honestly that I think we have all
They become
grown up
very
as
defensive. They become very
no, no,
defensive.
no. Yeah, they become defensive because the Hindu term has been imposed on them. A Sanatani, I'm very happy calling myself a Sanatani, but Hindu word is a foreign word. It was not a part of our ancient, literary dialogue. So we are being forced to be, we are being forced to confine ourselves to a term called Hinduism, which
But
is not
majority,
our
my counter
identity.
question to you on that is, see, whether you call Sanatan Dharma or Hindu, but the majority of the world knows you as knows us, all of us,
It
who are
is
practicing
so.
as Hindu.
It
But
is impertinent on us to tell them that Hindu is a word that came in, but we have been sort of nomenclatured as Hindu, but we are Sanatani. And Sanatani has no, Hinduism is not a religion, you see. So when somebody tries to tell us, somebody tells me I'm a Hindu, I get the idea that they are making me like their religion. I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim. Whereas Hinduism is not as dogmatic as Christianity or Muslim. So we don't want to be nomenclatured in a particular uh, ideology that they want to impose
Neeraj,
on us.
thank you so much for your time. We are on the top of the hour, and but very appreciative that you spoke very openly, and
Thank
I
you.
think our viewers really appreciated this.
Thank you so much.
So thank you viewers for asking those questions. I did ask all the questions that you said. Some of the important professors have asked these questions, and we will come back with Neeraji again with this frank discussion on history, and we'll continue the topic of history, Indraprastha, and other areas of
I
India.
think you keep a separate time for Hinduism and why we object to being called a Hindu, because we don't want to be labeled as dogmatic.
So Neeraji, these are live shows. We'll talk it
Yeah,
separately.
sure,
So thank
sure.
you all very much
Thank
for
you so
joining,
much. Thank
and
you very
namaskar.
much.